Thank you, Senator Fisher. Senator Kaine, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for your wonderful testimony and your service. I want to ask some intel questions to begin. Isn't it the case that our ability to deter is advanced significantly if we have the most comprehensive awareness of the nuclear capacities of our adversaries? Is that fair to say?
I would say that what we have to have is the most exquisite understanding of what the potential enemy leaderships value. We know about their weapon systems. The weapon systems are at the command of their national leaders. So we need to know what to hold at risk, which canonically has been the leadership itself, those structures that keep them in power, selected parts of their military forces, and the industrial potential to sustain war, so that they know if they aggress against us or our allies, the terrible things will happen to their ability to have a country.
And in addition to wanting to know that about our adversaries, if the goal is to deter nuclear war, it's also important to have good intel about other nations that are not adversaries. So, for example, India and Pakistan are nuclear nations. They're not adversaries, but if the goal is to deter nuclear war, having exquisite information about their plans and nuclear capabilities is important. And it's also important to have information about our allies, NATO allies, what their intentions are. This information is extremely valuable. It's extremely valuable. And it's very dangerous if it gets in the wrong hands. There's a prosecution going on right now in West Virginia of somebody who works over at the Navy Yard who was trying to pass U.S. nuclear secrets to a nation that's not an adversary, Brazil, as is publicly reported, seeking huge dollars for it. The federal judge in that case just threw out a plea agreement where the individual, Mr. Toby, would have been sentenced to 17 years in federal prison. The judge threw that out as insufficient. So obviously information about U.S. nuclear capacity in the wrong hands is extremely valuable, and it's very dangerous if that information gets out. And I guess I'd like to explore the danger of information getting out that we have about not our own capabilities, but other nations. If having exquisite information about adversaries or allies or other nations is important to us to further a deterrence goal, if our information, for example, about adversaries' exquisite capabilities were to be released, I could imagine very significant dangers. I mean, adversaries would understand what we would know about them. They could change their plans. They could obscure what they are doing. They could make it more difficult for us to come up with the right modernization to deter them. Similarly, information we have about allies' nuclear capacity. If those were to get into the wrong hands, they could be used by other adversaries to target them. So I guess I want to ask you, given that having exquisite information about the nuclear capabilities of other nations and their intent and their thoughts about deterrence, given how important that is, you would agree with me that this kind of information, if it's held by the U.S. government, is highly, highly valuable, and we should do everything we can to make sure that it's not released to others without authorization, correct? Ms. Creed?
Yes, sir, very much so. And I would also add there are other things that are of equal importance. So, for instance, cyber capabilities, space capabilities, all the things that underpin our deterrence and that we need to know about so that we can have a strong deterrent and also to be able to counter and protect against some of those things which are not openly known that others are doing.
Others who want to weigh in? Ms. Gottmuller?
If I may briefly comment, Senator, it is a fine balance. I agree with you absolutely that information must be defended and without authorization must not be released. In certain circumstances, information can have a deterrent effect, of course. And I wanted to add to my answer to Senator Shaheen a moment ago that one of the things that has happened lately is the NATO allies have all move forward on modernization of their dual-capable aircraft. Some, such as the Germans, we were not expecting them to move forward so smartly. So having them move forward and talk about it publicly is good for deterrence in Europe. So sometimes the information is valuable in that realm.
And usually, if that information is going to be shared, there would be a strategic discussion about the value of it being shared, not shared in a, I think, Ms. Creedon, you opened off and said it was a chaotic world these days. Information like that, if it's going to be shared, should be done so strategically and not in a one-off chaotic way, correct?
Absolutely, sir. And proper authorization from the government in charge of the information responsible for it is always necessary.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Kaine. Senator Rounds, please.